Good afternoon, everyone. You've come to the right place today, challenging the procurement status quo, enabling procurement function fireside chat. This is going to be a ripper. We will just wait for everybody to join us. So please, you know the drill, get on the chat function and tell us where you're from, but make sure you use the drop-down box with all attendees and all panelists, because we love to learn where everybody's from. We've got someone from Sydney, welcome. Sunny Sydney. Sit back, relax, and we'll get started shortly. But keep those messages coming on the chat bar. It's a good way for us to interact. Welcome from Melbourne. Got some people from Wellington, Auckland, and Launceston. Welcome. I hope it's a sunny place for everyone. We won't be long, we'll get started. Welcome everyone. Excited to be hosting today's webinar. Firstly, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. Now, they're the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting from today, but I recognise that there are many lands that we all sit on across our countries. And we pay our respects to those elders past and present and extend respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. And we also recognise the First Nation people of Australia have occupied and cared for our continent for over 65 years. And to our New Zealand neighbours, Tēnā koukou, tēnā koukou, tēnā koukou katoa. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. We're a global professional body for procurement and supply professionals. And we really are your professional partner for life. We're here to support you through your professional journey, and we're also here to support you with knowledge. And today's webinar is just one of those ways that we're supporting our community. As a member of CIPS, you're a trusted professional and you've passed those highest procurement standards with code of conduct and ethics. And you're certainly successful and you're in demand. So it's those that with MCIPS and FCIPS means to employers, you have reached the highest standard and you're also likely to earn more. And most importantly, CIPS is your gateway to connections. And honestly, right now, there's never been a better time to be virtually connected and have you with us today. And we're seeing some great examples around the globe of communities connecting and sharing ideas, particularly the procurement community. So keep connected and join us on LinkedIn. But for now, let me introduce you to Phil Chalkley. Phil is the Victorian Branch Chair. He's a volunteer. He volunteers his time and his dedication to supporting events just like this and supporting the committee. Thanks, Phil. Over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, everyone. Warm welcome to you all for joining us today in this webinar. As Chair of the Victorian Committee, very appreciate the time that you're making to join this and this discussion, this topic, and we've got some great presenters to hear how Microsoft have how they're working through their change and their direction on procurement, which is a fantastic story, I have to say. But before we move into that, just some housekeeping notices for you. Firstly, we have all attendees have been muted during the presentation. However, we do ask that if you put forward questions that you do have, and you will see down the bottom the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you could use that to provide your questions during the discussion, and we will have a Q&A session as part of it. So I'll be moderating and going through those questions and getting our our presenters to provide answers, their insights into those questions. So if you can use that, that'd be fantastic. As I said, and as Sharon indicated, today's topics around challenging the procurement status quo, listening to Microsoft and what they've been doing over the last couple of years, and also the direction they're going. It's very much a shift in how procurement probably traditionally or has operated. And I think it's an exciting way to look at procurement as a function and how we can better integrate and work with our businesses. But so what I'd like to do is introduce our presenters. We've got Georgie Farmer. Georgie's a senior leader with over 15 years experience in driving transformation, both regionally and globally, in particular around, I'll say, indirect procurement services. Georgie's been with Microsoft since 2008 and has experienced quite a lot of change during that period, and has been involved in participating and working through sort of different changes, be it whether global operations, strategic sourcing, supplier management, and beyond. Is currently leading the International Talent Services Program, which covers off 20 different countries. For Microsoft, and that's all about quality and diverse external talent aspects. Welcome, Georgie. And with Georgie, we have Dave Andrews, who since leaving university has sort of took advantage of the mining boom across in Australia, and has held procurement roles, in construction, mining, health, and now with Microsoft, the technology. Dave's got a passion for procurement, but using it as an enabler, as a tool to create an all-inclusive, I'll say, economy, driving innovation, driving change, and allowing procurement to enable the business to achieve their outcomes in a more efficient and effective and sort of enabled manner. Self-service, I'll drop the word self-service in there, but Dave can talk about a lot of how he loosens the reins on procurement, but to the value of the business, and how it uses technology or policies and to actually help the business to deliver their necessary outcome. So without me talking any further, what I'd like to do is pass over to Dave and Georgie, who will go through their presentation. And as I said, we'll come back around some Q&A once they're finished. Dave, Georgie, welcome.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. Love to know how many people are from Melbourne on the call and who's not, but we can find out that throughout. Well, thank you for joining today, and if we can just move to the next slide, we'll get started. So I think we're going to do about 20-25 minutes of chatting about Microsoft Procurement, and we could probably spend weeks doing that, but we'll cram it into 25 minutes. And then we really want to hear from you, questions, comments. We really want this to be interactive, so please use that chat window, and I think we're looking forward to a great discussion. So I'm going to kick off, and Dave, my partner in crime, will probably do most of the talking, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to start with the big picture here, right? So mission to culture. And I'm sure you've all heard of Microsoft, but we won't make any assumption of what people know about the company. I'm not going to touch through everything here, but we do have some sort of standard information that we'd like to share about Microsoft if you're not up to speed on what we're doing today. But our mission, and this does flow down into procurement quite a lot, is to empower every person and every organisation on the planet to achieve more. It's very big, it's enduring, it's been around quite a long time. We haven't really changed our mission statement for over 10 years. It really drives who we are and everything that we do, from procurement, sales, marketing, technology, everything across our entire company is focused on this ultimate mission. And we emphasise our passion to empower the people on the planet and the lasting institutions that they build. So as we consider the opportunities and pressing challenges facing the world today, look what just happened with COVID and technology, as we work to empower 7 billion people on the planet, look, we're on a Zoom call today, achieving a wonderful connection and community. Now, we must recommit to the sense of purpose and mission and redefine what achieving more means for our Microsoft world. And so looking forward, we believe empowerment to achieve more is connected into 4 key components. So we have our really big picture of goals of broad economic growth through tech intensity, to ensure that this economic growth is inclusive, to build trust in our technology and its use, and our privacy and data protection is a huge part of that, and commit to a sustainable and diverse future. So that's really what we're here to do as an organisation. And then through our different world views, computing is in everything we do, right? It's what we call the era of intelligent cloud. So these days, everything's involving cloud, from your phones to your homes to your cars. And what we call intelligent edge, which is shaping the next innovation phase. And this is driven by 3 massive computing technology trends. The first is computing. So it's no longer defined as a device or a data center, I should say. It's more ubiquitous and distributed from the cloud to the edge. It's in everything we do in our society today, whether that be touch, speech, vision or gesture. And the second is AI, artificial intelligence. So we've seen enormous, fast and tremendous progress on that in recent years, from everything from object recognition, speech recognition, machine learning and translation. But these are no longer breakthroughs that are just theoretical. We're using ambient intelligence to infuse everything experience that we do today. It helps our interactions and really distills knowledge from everything around us. And the third is really the transition from putting the device at the centre of what we do to people. And I think that's the biggest shift I've seen in Microsoft's culture in recent years since our CEO, Satya Nadella, took over. It's really about human first and how we include our technology in our lives. So that's just a little bit about Microsoft and what we're here to do. But underpinning all that, you'll see at the bottom, is really culture. And culture has driven, Satya has driven an amazing change of culture. When I joined 12 years ago, it was still pretty good culture. But now I personally feel that I, as an employee, have a mission. I know how my work rolls up to the organisation. I know my trusted partners, whether it be in procurement or the business or other parts of the business, we are measured on collaboration and helping others as well. And so that culture is really about growth mindset, and it creates and underpins everything that we do. So Dave's going to talk a bit more about culture, and then we'll get into the key procurement stuff a little bit after that. So we'll move on. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Georgie. So we're going to talk about Microsoft's culture, and our culture is founded in the concept of growth mindset. Growth mindset means anyone can learn and grow. We believe that potential is nurtured, not predetermined, and we want to foster people that are curious and want to be continual learners. We believe that we shouldn't be afraid to fail. And we identified the following attributes to really help growth mindset flourish in our organisation. And these are applicable across the business. We'll just jump to the next slide, Sophia, please. Growth mindset for us, and these slides have a lot of words in them. I'm not going to drain them, but we'd love you to use them as assets for your future development. There isn't a week that goes by in Microsoft where we don't talk about growth mindset. Learning over knowing and really understanding that growth mindset was a psychological model that was developed by a lady, Carol Dweck. And I strongly encourage you all to read the book Mindset, challenge your thinking, and challenge the way that we coach, mentor, and learn across our organisations. There's a lot of examples there of where we were and to where we want to be. An example there of cannot take risk, cannot fail. Now we celebrate risks, small and large. Failure leads to mastery. So growth mindset is at the core of our culture. We'll jump to the next slide. Being customer obsessed is extremely important, and particularly, I believe, important for a procurement function. We need to understand who our customers are, what they need, and how we can enable them to achieve the best outcomes for the business that we all work for. Growth mindset inspired us to be wildly curious about our customers. We wanted to learn more and more about them. We wanted to understand what made them tick, and we wanted to understand how we can motivate them to achieve more. And this focus goes across our business. It isn't just our external customers. We as procurement need to focus on our internal customers, and we need to understand that we're all part of Microsoft together, and we'll talk about that in a second. Sophia, we'll jump to the next slide. Diverse and inclusive. Anyone that's on this call that's heard me talk about diversity and inclusion before knows just how passionate I am. Being present in 120 countries, Microsoft needs to represent the community that we serve, and that goes from our suppliers to our customers to our employees. And we wanted to take that focus on diversity and inclusion as far as we could take it. We don't want to just be aware of diversity, we want to celebrate it. We want to hold people accountable for driving inclusion across our company. We want to ensure that we have inclusive behaviours, and we all are required to take significant training courses around unconscious bias, inclusive behaviours, to help us learn and educate ourselves on biases that we may have that we aren't aware of. And I encourage everyone to really, when you have a feeling or a strong reaction to someone, really dig into that, understand why it is. Because a lot of the time that's an unconscious bias. That's something that we can all do to better enable us to work together, better enable us to represent and serve our customers. And we have a huge focus on diversity and inclusion, including in our supply chain. And that's a topic hopefully I'll speak about it another time. Sophia, we'll jump to the next one. One Microsoft. I know this might sound a little bit weird, but when I got to Microsoft 5 years ago now, there's a famous drawing of Microsoft. I've forgotten who the artist's name was, but it was every business group in Microsoft at that time. I think we had 70 different business groups, and they were all sort of holding guns to each other's head, figuratively, obviously. And we really needed to break that down. And there's so many organisations I've worked in before where we are siloed. We do have significantly different and competing priorities, and that really broke down the fabric and the culture of the organisation. So we needed to take a one Microsoft approach. We needed to inform and be transparent. We needed to value the contributions of others. And as Georgie said, part of the foundation of our culture is valuing contribution of others and how we impact them, and we're measured on that. And it's something that we're super passionate about, and we continue to be to this day. We'll jump to the next one. So making a difference. I think you can tell from our mission to enable each and every person and organisation on the planet to achieve more, that this is the core of what we do. When I talk to my peers in procurement, and I'm lucky enough to do that today, I think this is the most impactful thing that we can do. How are we making a positive contribution and a difference, not only within our company, but within our community? And I think we can have purpose, we can add value, we can have impact. It's just the way that we need to look at how we operate within the ecosystem and the environments that we're given. something we should be proud of. We enable our companies to engage our economies, and driving a more inclusive economy and making a difference past the dollars that we spend is super important. And together we can change the world. And it's something that we continue to build our focus on. I will jump to the next slide. And I'll hand back over to Georgie to run through a couple of slides, and then I'll jump back on. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. All right. So as you've heard from both of us a little bit more about Microsoft company culture and how we connect to that. So getting into how has Microsoft Procurement evolved, and how are we structured, and what are some of the things we do that may or may not be different to what you do in your own organisations. But it started when I think about 2008 in Singapore when I joined the company. We had about roughly 50 people in procurement globally, and so this is indirect services, right? And now we're, give or take 220. People go, wow, that's big. That's a big growth in 12 years. And it is. And it's not just because we source more, we're actually doing a lot more things. But with the structure at that time, it was very much regionalised. So we went from around about 2008, I think it was about 2010, so about 2 years later, we went from regional procurement functions. We still had a global chief procurement officer. However, we were fairly empowered to do what we wanted in the region, which was good and it was bad. We wasted a lot of time, we had a lot of replication. And so as Microsoft was continuing to grow, go into more countries, look for efficiencies, we really went on that journey. So it was both a company-driven and a procurement finance-driven structural change. We've always pretty much reported to finance in my time anyway. So in 2010, we went from regional to global functions, and we've had roughly every 3 years slight reiterations of that, but it has pretty much remained the same. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. In terms of our internal customers, as a company, we're almost, I think we're 120,000, actually no, last count 140,000 permanent staff and about 90,000 contract staff. But within that, we have 80,000+ buyers. So people are buying anything indirect, whether that be travel, talent, hardware, software, professional services, marketing services, all of the above. So we have a lot of users. And we service 110 locations in countries. Not in country, but we do service them. And Dave will talk more about that too. Our supply base, because we came from regional structure over the years to more global functions, we've spent a long time in really rationalising our supply base. And we had a simplification and rationalisation strategy about 5 years ago, and we really cleaned up our supply base. So what we call a managed supplier, we have roughly 20,000, it's probably a bit more than that. Seems like a lot, but if you think we're 110 countries and the pure scale and size of what we do, it's about half of what it used to be, actually. Our spend is in the tens of billions. We can't tell you the exact number, but we are processing in excess of 350,000 purchase orders a year, and we have other buying channels that don't use POs as well. So it is quite a lot of transactional behind the scenes work going on. And then in terms of impact, we do have key metrics for impact, and the one we're sharing with you today is our diverse spend, and we have some really big ticket goals for that, but we're currently tracking, I think that was last financial year, which finished in June. It was at $3 billion US plus. So Dave might even touch on the diversity goals as well. So that's just a little bit about us and where we've come from. So the next slide, thank you, talks a bit about our functional structure that I mentioned earlier. So our procurement mission, as you can see, it doesn't actually have cost savings in our mission, but it is about value and how we enable the business And our role is being stewards to drive proactive, innovative, compliant and cost-effective global solutions. So a solution could be everything from a program to a sourcing project, and it's finding ways to enable the business. So we split our organisation into 6 key pillars. So on the left-hand side, you can see there are 3 what we call business-facing functions. And on the right, you can see there are more global or enterprise-wide platform functions. So I'll start from left to right. Strategic sourcing. So the face there is my manager, Chad, and it has been historically a strategic sourcing. So it's the larger sourcing. We oversee the small sourcing, but we actually outsource that to another provider, and they help the business do that. We have a front procurement engagement team, which is what Dave belongs to. I belong to strategic sourcing. Dave belongs to procurement engagement, and we partner together. But from my perspective, procurement engagement is like the account manager, the sales, the face of procurement to the business. And that's a really important role. It also has different skill sets to maybe some traditional procurement people as well. We have our large or strategic supplier relationship management teams, our SAMs, and they are very much looking at our top 200 suppliers, and many of our suppliers are also customers. So we have what we call 360-degree insight, but we have performance metrics and scorecards, which have evolved in the last 3 to 5 years, and really making sure our suppliers are delivering what we need them to be and being compliant. So on the functional side, we have our compliance team, and sorry, my pop-up screen is going here. So there's been a huge increase in focus of compliance in recent years because of the likes of GDPR and data privacy. We are a data company. We're protecting our customers' data. So we have the extremely high standards that we have as a company for our customers' protection is exactly the same as what we have with our suppliers. So we hold our suppliers to the highest standards, and that is across things like ethical, social, regulatory, and privacy and protection. We also have our supplier program and diversity team. So the SSPA is a standard that suppliers must reach for being a supplier of Microsoft, and that's all public on microsoft.com/procurement. You can find out what those standards are. And more recently, we've introduced about 2 years ago our central services team, which does drive a lot of functions and programs and tools, and is driving the strategy behind our digital transformation as a procurement organisation. And that includes our intelligent resource to pay, amongst many other transformation opportunities we are doing as a procurement organisation. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of our basic org structure. And then now Dave's going to chat about how that actually operates in real life. So over to you, Dave.
Sure. Thanks, Georgie. We'll jump to the next slide, please. So this is really a look under the hood of Microsoft Procurement. For us, this is our operating model. We work with the business at the centre. I think it's extremely important to emphasise that our job is to enable a business outcome, and we use business-led procurement at Microsoft. And sometimes that creates challenges, sometimes that creates a lack of visibility for some procurement teams and solutions. But we firmly believe that putting the business at the centre is one of the most critical things we can do to drive better more success for procurement and also drive better innovation across our business and our markets. I'll look at the big orange circle there. Georgie's talked about procurement solutions and programs, and we have a number of those. While we say we don't work in a category management model, we do have a couple of categories listed here, such as travel, meetings and events, and external staff. Those do have dedicated program managers that manage those sourcing activities and contract management activities across the globe. Georgie's the lead for our external staff component, but we also have other procurement solution areas and programs such as software, catalogs, recycling, SSPA, which Georgie mentioned before, which is around GDPR compliance, and then the Microsoft Supplier Program, which is our MSP program, which we're just going through a process of revising that. But I think the really interesting thing for us when we talk about how do we operate at Microsoft in terms of interacting with the business on a daily basis is the procurement engagement manager role. So my role is the procurement engagement manager. I look after Australia and New Zealand, and I look after cross-country collaboration for Australia, New Zealand and APAC, and we report back up into Asia. And really our role is defined in three areas. It's empowered engagement, compliance awareness, and enabled supplier solutions. One of the critical things that we need to raise your awareness of is Microsoft is split by country based on risk profile. So a PEM that is in Vietnam, as an example, has a higher country risk assessment, and therefore that PEM maybe have a higher focus on compliance. Their job might be to do a lot more supply due diligence and pre-qualification of vendors, and also back-end compliance to ensure that transactions are taking place in the right manner. For Australia, as an example, we're a low-risk market. So a lot of my engagement is around how do we empower through engagement, giving global insights, proactive influencing, making sure that we're tightening controls on activity and sourcing activity and supplier activity across our market. There's a much smaller focus on compliance. I, as an example, do one compliance session across my communities each year. My peer in Vietnam does 4. And then the last portion of our role, enabling through supplier solutions, is extremely important. We need to identify suppliers that are right fit for our business group. We need to be proactively engaged with them during planning cycles rather than reactively engaged at the point of the transaction. And also driving corporate and social responsibility. So part of my role in Australia is to really focus on diversity and inclusion. How are we creating a more inclusive economy? And we've built a supply diversity program that rolls up to our program in the US, which focuses on Indigenous, women-owned, Australian disability enterprises and social enterprises. And we're happy to partner with Supply Nation, Social Traders, We Connect International, and Viability to help us do that work. We then move on to our supplier account managers, our SAMs, where we have high spend vendors, usually our top 10% vendors, the top 10% of our spends, they'll have a SAM. And their role is to really interact and drive supplier performance across that supplier for the business group. A great example of that for us is our marketing advertising spends. We work with Dentsu quite closely, and we have a dedicated SAM that works with them to drive performance, contractual performance to complex SLAs and KPIs through the duration of their contract. That's a huge spend for Microsoft and something that our SAMs invest a lot of time in. We also have, as Georgie mentioned, most of the time when I run a sourcing project, I actually engage with one of our outsourced service partners who does all the project management, administration, all the fun stuff. They do that on our behalf, and procurement becomes a key stakeholder to provide those global insights into the market and assist where possible in driving better value for money. But predominantly, we put our business to the front. The person that owns the budget, the person that owns the outcome, they're encouraged to do that negotiation in collaboration with ourselves and our outsourced service partner. We find this creates better ownership, better compliance, and more often better value for money in the longer term, because the business is always at the front of our procurement activity. They're the decision maker, and we support them in making the best business decision possible for our organisation. So we've got to the point where we're going to ask Q&A. So Sophia will jump to the Q&A section. Georgie, is there anything I missed there? Do you want to add anything?
No, I think some of the questions we've got coming through will give some live examples of what you just talked about, actually, in addition. So, yeah, some really good questions. Thank you. Keep them coming. We just have to not spend 10 minutes on each one because we could. I think the first one, thank you for a great presentation. What procurement technology or systems do you use to manage this scale of procurement activities? So, well, Dave, you can talk about some of it, and I can talk about the other bit.
Yeah, sure. So let's start at the backbone, if you like. We actually use SAP as our ERP, and we actually use Microsoft technology that sits on top of SAP. A lot of SharePoint front ends. We do for sourcing activity, managing our sourcing pipeline. We use the Dynamics 365, which is a great way to manage projects across business. For back-end reporting, obviously we use Power BI, and we have a lot of dashboards that we run across our SAP database to help us scale with that. We are in development of what we're calling our intelligent resource to pay solution, which will also deal with pre-qualification of vendors. It'll also deal with ongoing compliance, and all of those solutions at the moment are being developed on Microsoft technology, as you might imagine, with the SAP backbone to support us and provide the holistic ERP. Georgie, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we still use Ariba for some of the sourcing, but when it's really large global scale with a large number of suppliers, we want to get an RFIP or X from, we're moving that to Dynamics because it has better functionality to do large data capture or information capturing and bring it back to a source and interpret it in a way that's meaningful versus some of the, what I would call a bit old school. So yeah, so we're currently using both Ariba and Dynamics at the moment.
I think that,
in terms of anything else, we do use some third-party technologies, talent sourcing. We always, as a tech company, and any other tech companies on the call would probably go, yeah, your engineering people or sales people say, oh, we can build that ourselves. And sometimes you're better off actually just going with the experts. So whether it be a travel system or whatever it is. So we do use other third-party softwares where it's specialist areas.
Yeah, I think a good example, Georgie, of using Dynamics was we a couple of years ago did a global program to raise rate cards for large consultancy businesses across the globe. There was over 2,000 companies. We did automated negotiations with those companies to rate cards, and we really drove a significant benefit to our business. Something that used to take over 30 days to do for a single vendor now took 2 days with minimal human interaction. So we've got some great examples of that in the slide deck that you'll be sent of digital transformation. So do we want to jump to a next question, Georgie?
So the next one on the list was how do you dovetail procurement transformation into organisational transformation, and was this seen as potentially constraining in growth? You can kick off with that one.
I can, thanks. I think that from my perspective, our cultural transformation, our organisational transformation is what drove a lot of the transformation we see in procurement today. We really stopped calling ourselves best in class. We really started analysing what are the things we need to do. And I think the biggest thing that drove our change was putting the customer at the centre, to be frank. Quite more often than not, when procurement's going through a transformation and a company's going through the transformation, there may be unaligned goals or objectives. And for us, we're very much aligned on building on the company culture and driving transformation across the business that links directly to the company's objectives for transformation. So I think we didn't see them as separate. We definitely saw them as the same thing, and we ensured that all of our transformation was driven or contributing to company success metrics.
Yeah, no, I'd certainly agree with that. Quite a few questions here, but I'm just sort of on a similar thread. Was there any challenges that we faced in transitioning from regional to global in a model? think global, act local. You know, there was always, we were very much a US-centric company, and we are, you know, more than half of our employee base is in the US. But I think through our cultural change and our inclusive drive, the good old, well, the US want to do it this way, and Australia or New Zealand needs to do it a different way because that makes sense for our business, I think has changed enormously. We respect other people's perspectives and opinions. We get input to that now, but back then, yeah, it wasn't an easy change, I must admit. And it probably took a good 3 years to sort of solidify. And you still get the rogue person back then wanting to do different things. But our voices were heard, and now I still think that we have some really great inclusiveness of we're coming up with a global strategy. Let's make sure we ask the people that's going to impact and affect whether that's going to work for them or not. So the culture helped drive that change later on. And Dave, you've got a couple of live examples, I think, of that.
Well, yeah, I do. Yeah.
More about that, or should we jump to other questions maybe?
Yeah, I think we better jump to a couple of other questions.
Okay.
Couple that are good for us to answer. I think, how do we celebrate risk? Can you give any examples? I think this is probably a really difficult thing, because this does drive, is driven by culture. For me, we want to fail fast and learn. We're not afraid of taking risk. We understand the risk that we're taking, but we're also understanding what's the impact should we not be successful. I think Satya Nadella, our CEO, gives a great example of where we tried to use artificial intelligence to respond using chatbots across the globe. Those chatbots were hacked and actually gave very probably non-PC responses to people. That was shut down immediately. Satya sent a company-wide email out to say, look, we tried something here, it failed. I'm proud of you for trying. Please don't define yourself by this failure, and let's see how we can do it better together. And that comes from Satya down all the way through our business. We've had many failures in procurement, many failures in technology, where we've tried to transform and it didn't quite hit the mark. We revise it quickly, we learn, we iterate, and we know we have the backing of our senior leaders to be able to do that. Failure isn't something seen as detrimental, because we all agreed on the target, the objective before we started.
It's a calculated risk generally.
Exactly.
You know, it's not just go make a silly decision and that's okay. It's very much about well thought out business plans. So yeah, and if it doesn't work well, you know, what did we learn from it, and how do we use those learnings, not just in our own department. You know, I had a recent learning as well, but how do we drive that learning and share that with others so they don't go make the same mistake as well? So that's part of that inclusiveness.
And that's part of one of the things we're measured on in our connects, our performance reviews, is how do we impact others? And that's sharing our learnings, that's sharing how we've had impact across our business, that's sharing how we failed. So we'll be held to account to do that when we get performance reviewed every year.
I think there's a great question here about how do we manage effective global regional recycling and waste management solutions. Yeah, there's been some awesome work done in that space in the last couple of years. Give the example?
Yep. Sure. So let's talk about electronics recycling. We do a lot of work at recycling our devices and all the electronics that come through Microsoft, not only customers, but our own. And we've centralized that. I'll give you an example. If my device goes into our recycle program, that device actually has to go to a factory in China to be wiped correctly, to be assessed as to whether it can be passed on to be resold, in most cases to disadvantaged groups in America, or if it has to be formally recycled. We have gone through a strict process to understand, firstly, to protect our privacy and security, because our devices contain content and personally identifiable data? And then second, how do we most appropriately recycle those products and services, and who can do that on our behalf?
Yeah, and I suppose up until more recently, we've, for our external staff, or our contractor base, we have a bit of a hybrid model today. Well, historically, Microsoft would provide the device when they come and work at our premise or on the network. And I'm seeing a shift of that, because the device would be more often than not a recycled device. So, you're talking a 2-3-year-old laptop that a contractor's getting. So sometimes that's not a great experience either, and we want them to be effective. So we want them to have the best device out there as well. So our IT department, or our corporate service engineering team, have developed technology for bring your own device as for contractor staff, and making sure that we've got the technology and the security to enable that in the best way. So that's another strategy we've been looking at in terms of how to enable, but not buy the devices ourselves or give really old ones to people that don't really needs to be different.
I can see this question here about how do we empower cost center managers? Wouldn't they take ownership?
Procurement recommendation.
Of procurement recommendation. So I love this topic. So I'll have the first crack at it. So for me, I think the way we work, I know the way we work is procurement actually doesn't give a formal recommendation to a stakeholder. The stakeholder is in most of the scenarios that I run, the stakeholder's at the heart. They're a key stakeholder through the process. They're determining and making a business decision at a point in time. We're giving them a framework to do that, and we're giving them some project management and administrative support so we can document what we've done. But I think the core of the question goes to, do you see procurement as a function or a skill? And personally, the way I view it is my job is to coach, educate, and manage people to develop their procurement skills. And if I can do a good job of that, and there are people in our organisation that do a great job of procurement, and some of them do a lot better than I can, I've really formed my function and my enablement role. We've allowed that person to make the best business decision for Microsoft through the right coaching, educating, and mentoring, and we've provided the right policies, the right procedures, and the right structure to enable them to self-serve. So for us, it's not about procurement always giving a recommendation or owning a recommendation and the stakeholder making a different business decision. Obviously, at times we do that, and the stakeholder has all the power in the world to make the choice that they want to make within our policies and procedures. But I think it's more about how do we upskill our business to be better procurement, to have better procurement skills, rather than solely relying on us to do that on their behalf.
I'd probably also add there's probably a slight caveat there that anything over a spend threshold must come to procurement, and that certainly varies by country as well. So the strategic sourcing group that I mentioned earlier does deal with generally $1 million deals and above. Sometimes, depending on the country and the risk profile of that country, that's lower, and procurement would run that because they, to that point of is there any bias with the business, and will procurement run a more unbiased procedure? But I think as people in the business learn and get involved in sourcing projects, when they're the stakeholder, they understand the methodologies. As Dave said, there are policies and procedures around it. So it is that balance of learning how they need to do it and to be objective at the end of the day, and to have qualitative scoring and quantitative scoring that is justifiable. That's still very important as part of the process.
Yeah. And I think the last thing is the stakeholder and the budget owner is the person that's accountable in all of our policies. So even when we go over the $1 million, procurement's just required to participate and review. We're not required to approve. So that's a really key differentiator. I think the business is solely accountable for compliance against the procurement policies, and I think that's a really big difference than most companies. I know in previous companies I've worked for, my name's the first one on there as a person that's accountable, and then everyone else comes after. So we've got another question here on D&I. D&I is a high priority for Microsoft, which is great. How do you work with employees that demonstrate or need guidance in embracing these important values? That's a good question and probably needs 45-minute answer. So I'll try and simplify it as best I can. For me, diversity and inclusion is about creating an opportunity bias. We need to create better ways for underrepresented groups to get in front of our stakeholders and win work. My philosophy, and it's different to some people, in Microsoft Australia, we haven't got targets for employees. They're not measured on diversity and inclusion. The only two people that have targets are myself and our general manager, Stephen, and we set those for ourselves to understand where we're going and how we're performing and what we want to attain. I think the important part for me is businesses need to focus on diversity and inclusion. When we have a stakeholder that doesn't want to focus on diversity and inclusion, one, they get measured on that as a core priority within their yearly review. Diversity and inclusion is a core priority, and procurement is one of the simplest ways they can contribute to that core priority. If a person doesn't want to provide opportunity to an inclusive business during a tendering process, or they believe they're not capable, sometimes that's just not a person that I'll focus on personally, and I'll use the people that are focused on giving opportunity to inclusive businesses as our North Stars, use them as the examples. They get all the kudos, they get pushed to the front of the room, and it's amazing how quickly the people that weren't interested in diversity and inclusion, particularly in procurement, become interested when they see other people getting recognition for the work that they've done. And realistically, all that work is providing opportunity to businesses that previously haven't had that opportunity, and then it's up to them to win the work from there. We need to award work on merit. We need to ensure that these businesses are performing, and usually the marketing that happens after that is something that's driven by the business because they're as passionate about it as we are.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is really just from a HR perspective of how do we as a company educate and train and get people to embrace these values. And it is through training. We have a whole bunch of compliance or training that has to be done, and it is mandatory that we must do these certain trainings. And I must admit, I'm very impressed with the HR and the marketing teams because they've come up with some really creative ways to train, some videos, there's stories. It's like I'm watching a soap opera with live examples. Like it's seriously, it's like I'm watching Netflix. It's really awesome. So they make it fun and interesting, but it is one way to drive awareness and education on our D&I goals as a company, internally and externally.
So we've got one more question there about social procurement. How highly do we weight it in tenders? For us in our policy in Australia, tenders over a certain amount, there's a requirement to provide an opportunity to a social business. So we provide the opportunity. We don't put it as part of the evaluation. I think we don't do as many tenders, so to speak, as our customers might do. So we don't. It's not a formal part of our evaluation criteria now.
We're losing you a bit there, Dave. Is that me?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, could be me.
No,
you're frozen.
Georgie, am I all good now?
Yeah, you're back on.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's me. So we definitely have a focus on giving businesses opportunity, and that's how we measure our success. We'd rather award work to an inclusive business than measure the impact of another business that's not an inclusive business. That would be our second preference. So it's probably not a perfect answer, but definitely it's something that we'd rather give the opportunity directly to an inclusive business first.
Yeah. The other question is, how do you measure collaboration with your business partners? So I think that's a PEM. How are you measured for success in your role, Dave?
Lots of ways. And I think we're short of time because I've seen Phil's face pop up. So
Just a polite reminder.
I'll quickly answer this one, Phil. So for me, we're measured on some procurement metrics, but to be frank, in our new evolution, not as many as you would think. So we have a thing called perspectives, which our stakeholders, we're required to send perspective to our stakeholders. Our stakeholders then provide feedback that's visible to us and visible to our manager. We're also measured by our procurement priorities and how we've impacted those. So it's a dual measurement of how have we impacted others, how have we impacted procurement, and what is the work that we've done ourselves. So our stakeholder measurement is direct feedback from our stakeholders, and sometimes no feedback is a really bad indicator. So if a stakeholder isn't going to give you any feedback, your managers will note that as well. So when we ask for feedback, we get feedback for the good or the bad, but it's all part of having growth mindset, learning, and trying to iterate for the next evolution of what you're focused on.
And we did, I don't know if we did this year, but previous years we've done an NSAT with key stakeholders as well, and programs such as the one that I run also have very much NSAT. It's customer satisfaction. So if we aren't enabling the business and making them happy, then we're not doing our job properly.
Excellent. All right. Sorry to interrupt all those answers to valuable questions. So really appreciate it. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Georgie, to give us insights into Microsoft and the journey you've been on and going forward on. It's really exciting. Yeah, to everyone, really thank you for your opportunity to join us for this webinar. We will hope you found the opportunity to listen and learn and take the opportunity to find something, maybe a different way of how procurement can operate and be very successful. A copy of the webinar and list of the questions will be setting that out in the week, so that will be available to everyone. So before we finish, what I'll do is I'll pass it back to Sharon, who'll close out this session. Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, Dave and Georgie.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Georgie and Dave. Honestly, you had me at shift from device to people, and your human-centric approach around technology is just fantastic. And I love the values, particularly measuring those values around culture and mindset and diversity inclusion. Wow, it must be an awesome place to be around. So thanks for sharing. That was great. I'm inspired. So we've got some more inspiring webinars coming up on the 26th of November. What's that, tomorrow? We've got the webinar, Shifts in Global Supply Chain Post-COVID, Revisiting the Strategic Choices and Practical Issues in Global Sourcing. That's Cobus van der Wyth and Rachel Wu from the Axis Group. So look out for that one, 26th of November. On the 2nd of December, also not far away, our fourth and final part of the Women Leaders in Procurement and Supply. This has been a ripper, Wisdom and Courage. So check out that on the 2nd of December and don't miss out, because we've got the Head of Procurement at ASC, Marley Smith, and we've also got Cindy Dunham, fellow from Orica Group. So a great one to that one. And then this is fantastic. Phil can attest to this. The 15th of December at 4:30 in Australia and 2 p.m. in New Zealand. Never been done before, a Victoria branch Christmas event and trivia event. So get your party Christmas hats on and attend that one. So please head to our events page on the website, and thanks again for joining us today. And please, if I could just ask you all to please do the feedback. You'll get prompted as you exit this forum. So please do the feedback, because with your feedback, we can make the next webinar even better. Until the next time, be safe, stay tuned.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.